Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Victorian London Fog from Harney and Sons, an old favorite on this channel. And for me, I got some more at the Soho Harney and Sons when I was able to visit, because I was just about out, which is good because I had it for a while, so it was probably not in its best shape, although it still tasted good. It's made really to be made as a latte, but I like it just with milk, which is similar enough. I know you can do all the steaming and all the foaming and all that stuff. I will do it sometimes, but just in this particular form, it's perfectly good. Don't know if I've ever had it without milk. Maybe that'll be something I do one day. But anyway, I thought I would do just a brief December wrap-up. I did a mid-month wrap-up, so I covered a lot of the books that I read. I think I read 8 books in their completion, or I finished 8 books, I should say, in December of 2020, and which for me is usually my peak. 8 books is usually, I may have read 9 or 10 in a month, but 8 is usually a good month for me. Mostly that's because I got really into the cozy mystery genre. Not that I'm not into it, but I really felt it in December, so I just read a lot of it, and that just adds to volume. But I also read a lot of different things, and also read more of some things that I didn't actually finish. So I just thought I'd talk about 4 books that I read in since the last update of December. And yes, my allergies are acting up, so my nose is going to sound gross once in a while. Sorry about that. Okay, so the first one I'm actually kind of, well, I don't know if the word is proud of, but happy to have accomplished. I finished Shirley from Charlotte Bronte, by Charlotte Bronte, from the mind of Charlotte Bronte, from the twisted mind of I had started it, and in October. I meant to start in March, but I don't want to talk about that again. And I started it in October as part of Victober. It was one of the group reads of October and Victober. I was reading it concurrently with a lot of other books, including another Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, which became the priority for me as time went on. And I think rightfully so, because it probably is better to read Jane Eyre first. Just, it's not like necessary, but I think it might be for me better. And I did. So I was glad to do that. And I also finished Tenant of Waffle Hall, which is Anne Bronte, but still, in my mild goal of completing all the Bronte novels, I have done very well. And it did bother me that Shirley was still kind of hanging out. It's different, as you'll see, with Dickens, because I keep having trouble continuing in the book that I'm reading, and there's a lot of other books that I have trouble finishing. I've not finished a Dickens book in a long time, and I kind of feel bad about that. But I also know that completing all of Dickens' books is possible, but with the way I read and all the different kinds of things I read, it might take more time, and that's fine. I don't mind. I want to read all the Dickens books that I want to read before I'm 50. I think that's a good goal. I have time. Trollope, that would be cool too, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But the Brontes, I was so close. So I'm like, well, now I only have one left, and that's The Professor by Charlotte Bronte, which is not supposed to be her best book, but it's one of her shortest writings, so yay. You know, I can actually finish the Brontes novels. I have some other writings of theirs that I still haven't quite finished reading, but as with Jane Austen, I don't care so much about that. But I just am happy to have finished this one, because it is one that I've wanted to read for many years. I bought this copy over a decade ago. It was in, I think this was, I could be wrong, but I think I bought this in part of a library sale. Maybe not, because it doesn't have the markings that I usually see. However I came upon this book, it's obviously long enough that I can't remember exactly when I got it. And as you could see, even though I tried to repair it, these Penguin English library books, I have you can't see them here now, but I have them over there. There's some orange spines. I have a number of books like that. I have a Trollope, I have a George Eliot, I have the Life of Charlotte Bronte, and they fall apart very easily, and I'm not pleased with that. So I already have another copy. I have a Everyman library, I think, of Shirley and the Professor, so I can get rid of this now. And it wasn't just the bad binding, or it's just old. Maybe it's just old. The glue is ancient or whatever. But the writing in this book, I have said that I know that I'm not completely against writing in a book, even for myself. I would use a pencil, no matter what. To me, I can't stand making markings in a book unless it's for school. But that's been a while for me. So I don't like making permanent markings in a book. So, because I like the idea that someone else, if they get it, they don't have to deal with all of my writing. Although, anyway, that's another story for another time. But when I talk about the writing in this book, I'm not talking about just a little bit of, marginalia, the occasional highlight. This is what I'm talking about. Almost the entire book is like this. And it is so distracting. But I picked this up as opposed to the hardcover, which I had been reading from, because I wanted to read it when I was taking the train into work. And if I was out at all, I just thought it'd be easier just to finish this up. And I'm glad I did, because it was a good book. I don't say it's going to be my favorite book of Charlotte Bronte's. That will probably be Jane Eyre. Because I haven't read Villette in so long that I can't even remember how... I know I liked it, but I don't remember if I would consider it. Maybe I'll do a reread someday. I have a nice clean copy of Villette that I might read, but not today. But I did enjoy Shirley. It took me a while to get into it. Like a lot of Victorian novels, sometimes the introduction of characters in the beginning takes one a while to get to the point. And one of the main characters was introduced pretty early on, and I got attached to her right away. And then the other main character took a while to come into the story. Once the two main ones were interacting, it picked up, I think. Really, it picked up, and things got better. And then it got to a point where there were things that were sad and not sad, but there were things, okay, people were introduced in the story that were more significant to a character than you thought from the beginning. And one person was significant in a way that you think that person would have mentioned it if they were in their past and now in their present. And the other one is also kind of like oh, yeah, I knew, but oh, well, I didn't tell you kind of situation. But that's a big spoiler, so I'm not going to talk about it. But this other character, it made me think, now, is it possible to be friends with someone and not mention a very important relationship you've had in your past? Yes, it has happened to me before. I'm pretty sure people I've made friends with in recent years that don't know a lot about certain people who were very important to me in the 90s, and they may come back into my life someday, and then they'll be like, well, why didn't you tell me about that person? And I'm like, because they're really not important to me now, and that's not putting them down at all. It's just that they're not. Or they were important, but they just didn't come up in conversation because I've tried to put them in my past, and now they're in my present, so we will talk about them. Right? But you see, I'm talking about someone I'm in my 40s, and to talk about someone that I knew in my late teens, early 20s it's possible that can happen. But for someone who is just in their 20s, and I think early 20s, both of these characters, I think, to just not mention to one of their closest friends that a person who is actually important to both of them in some ways just didn't come up as mentionable at all until later on in the book. That was a bit unrealistic, but not as unrealistic as some things that have happened in Charlotte Bronte's novels. Not as utterly coincidental as some things that happen in a lot of Victorian novels. So, in the long run, I thought it was a good story. It had a lot of good, strong, I guess, female characters. The end wasn't exactly as I'd hoped, but not disappointing either. I don't know. It felt a little bit tidy. It felt, I don't want to tell Charlotte Bronte this, but it felt a little Jane Austen-y. Not exactly, but a little bit like something Jane Austen might do. Like cleaning everything up. But just with a Yorkshire backdrop. So, yeah, I thought the book had, all in all, it was a good book. I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it to people who like reading Victorian novels, who like to read books about women, who the depiction of having like unrequited love, when serious feelings for somebody and not being able to do anything about it was actually a really good um, theme in the book for a while. So I kind of like that. I'm really distracted by the light in my eyes today. Hold on a second. I don't know. It might still be there, but for now. So I don't know what I was talking about. Yes. So that was strong and relatable. There was a lot of things in here that were related. I mean, it was kind of historical fiction because it was taking place in earlier time than the book was written, which was in the sort of the mid 19th century. It was going back to the early part of the 19th century. So that was kind of cool. I thought it discussed something, and it was mentioned, I think, in that book I read about Anne Bronte recently. I think that's where I read it. But there was discussion about one of the main characters decides she doesn't have really a lot to do, and she's not, she's stuck in this sort of having feelings for somebody, but it doesn't seem to be gonna be able to go anywhere. So she's just bored. She doesn't have an occupation. She's kind of jealous that men have occupations, that men can just get a job, get a career or something. And she would love to be able to keep accounts or something. But she decides to consider in her mind becoming a governess. It's not necessary. She will be okay, probably financially, not need to become one, but she just thinks about it. And then someone else who had been a governess decides to talk her out of it, which was probably good for her because it wouldn't have worked. And she gives her basically the negative sides of being a governess, which the Brontes knew a lot about, and basically talks her out of it. And that, I don't know. There must have been some people in that time that were governesses that didn't have horrible lives, but it was good that this character was talked out of it because it wouldn't have been good for her. But I know that I think that the book that I was thinking about was kind of saying how to make that kind of throwaway. Oh, I think I'll just become a governess. When that was usually a desperate thing to do. People who really needed to make a living. They couldn't just get jobs. There were certain classes of women that could become servants, obviously. There probably were eventually some who were able to keep shops and stuff like that. But people of this particular class, which wasn't the highest, but sort of an upperish middle class, I guess, they like kind of a lot of Jane Austen's characters. You can't just go out and just get a job to keep yourself busy, or, you had to only if you were absolutely desperate for money. So it might seem like someone like her is just careless, but it's just that she didn't know. What, is she going to look it up on the internet? What's it like to be a governess? How many people is she going to talk to? So I thought it really addressed what it's like to be a woman during that time and how few options you had, really, if you weren't married or having kids. Even that wasn't always a great option, but that's another story. And then the other main character is an heiress who is busy, who does have things to run in a way, but also just has everything you could possibly want, but does she want more, and that kind of thing. And it's a good discussion. I thought it was pretty good. There was a chapter called The First Blue Stocking. I didn't realize that expression went back that far, even to middle Victorian times. I thought that was an expression that came up, and I probably did know this already because I've read enough about these sort of things, but it just maybe you forget. I thought it was something that came up in like the suffragette times or something, but it reminded me of there's a bookshop. I don't know if it's still in existence now because everything nowadays closes. But downtown in Manhattan, there's a feminist bookstore called the Blue Stocking, and I did go in there once, and it was a little bit like the feminist bookstore that you would see on Portlandia. A little bit of that vibe, not entirely, but just I don't know what made me think of that. But it was kind of interesting what people thought of women who were well read or intelligent and used that in communications with other people. So that was good. I thought it was I don't know if I was going to do it. I don't think I'm going to do a favorites of the year, but if I was going to do like a top 10 favorites, it might factor in, but probably closer to the 10 than the top. But I am really glad I read it. And now I can get rid of this copy. I don't know if anyone else wants this copy. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is a book that I read that is also a mystery. So I'm only doing a brief tea and mystery here because it's the only one, and it's part of the series that I've been showing a lot because I just was catching up on this. This is the third out of the fourth, but I read it out of order, so anyway. This is The Cat of the Baskervilles, a Sherlock Holmes bookshop mystery by Vicky Delaney. You'll have seen this series a lot on this channel recently just because I liked it. And there is one more that came out that I haven't read that I put on hold in the library. The character who works in and lives in West London, Cape Cod, which is, I think, a fictional place, but probably based on real places, and runs this bookshop with her uncle who never really shows up that much in the story except as kind of a missing character, although anyway, that type. So she's been there for a long time, but she's from London, England, so the next book she's gonna go to London, which is kind of cool for me, because I always like things when they show up in London. I want to see what it's like taken out of the normal place. There's not a lot actually having to do with the cat. The cat just happens to be in the bookshop named Moriarty. But it's just a continuation. This time, an older actor who's also English who decides to play Sherlock Holmes in a local to here production of Hound of the Baskervilles, and he's a bit, past his prime, so there's a lot of questions of whether he could pull it off. The casting has been a little bit questionable as far as compatibility. And then so the bookshop has a adjoining tea room where the main character Gemma Doyle's friend Jane Wilson runs the tea room. So they work together in having this kind of big tea at this wealthy woman who's, I guess, sponsoring the whole theater productions. They have this big tea. I mean, I don't know how one can pull this off outside, and then, of course, at this point, Sir Nigel is the name of the actor, dies. So the question is, did he die? Was he murdered? Was it suicide? Was it an accident? And then Jane, the owner of the tea room, her mother kind of gets implicated a little bit. So Gemma, who is not an actual detective but plays one in the books, decides to look into things a little bit. And that's basically the story. There's a little bit of furthering of certain characters' relationships in it, which answered certain questions that I had when I accidentally read the books out of order. It was enjoyable. I don't think it was as enjoyable as the second book that I read in the series, but it was a nice kind of good flow read. So yeah, I recommend it. Do I have Hat Head? Probably. And then I'm just going to briefly talk about the two books that I made progress in. I didn't finish, but I made progress, but I wanted to finish these. I'm not too disappointed. And one of them is will I ever finish Dombey and Son? I don't know. I made progress, probably a good 100 pages in this book, and maybe 75 pages. And I liked it, although there were certain characters I still think are, come on, superfluous. How many people do we need? Kind of like Shirley. There's these Victorian novels have a big cast of characters, and I understand it, but I also am kind of like, tone it down just a little bit, because it's hard to keep track of with my 21st century mind, But that's not Dickens' fault, really. Things are going to a slightly dubious moment. So I don't know. Things I think are going to get worse for certain people. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I'm not going to give away anything about that. But I will continue reading in this. I will. I don't know when I'll finish it. When I finish it, I got to have a party or something. Hannah's Books did a post recently about two cookbookish books related to Dickens. One was a drinking with Dickens, I think it was called. I don't know. And I have to do something of a celebration if I finish this book. And then I also picked this up. I had started this earlier in 2020, I think, and I liked it, but then I just kind of got stuck. So I said, I'd read a little more. I didn't make monumental progress because I only read it the last few days of the year, but that's Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. It is good. It gets very much into therapy and why therapy is useful, and the writer herself is a therapist, but she finds herself in need of therapy herself. So it's a lot of interactions with her own patients. Is that patients? I guess, and her therapist. So I like it. I like it, but I'm just not rushing through it, and that's okay. Actually, it's the kind of book that I can sort of just get right back into. But oh my goodness, I have so many books to read this month, so I don't even know how far I'm going to get. But yeah, so that was my, really part 2 of December wrap up, but I think I had enough to say about that. So yeah, let me know if you liked any of these books, if you read any of these books, if you had a good December. I hope you did, and I hope you're having a good January. Really, I am. If you like talking about books about therapy, if you like talking about Victorian books, if you like talking about mysteries, any of these things, memoirs, etc., please subscribe and like this video if you like it. And if you don't, please ignore. This is Catherine taking tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day and year and month.